Devin, have you been following it? It looks like we have a lot of the names we need.
Yeah, I was just trying to cross check.
All right, then I think we can go ahead and get started. Happy New Year to everyone. Really appreciate you being here for what we think will just be a quick call, but do hope that everyone was able to have some rest and relaxation over the last couple of weeks. So as we start this call off, I'll have some reminders, and please remember to mute your line if you're not speaking. Please remember to identify yourself in the organization before you speak for minutes purposes. If you are on the phone and logged in via the web, turn off your computer speakers so it minimizes the backup. And a reminder that the chat and polling are reserved for the board members. Finally, also that this meeting is recorded again for purposes of the minutes. So I will go ahead, call this to order and call the roll. And I think I saw Cheryl Kashuba. There you are.
I'm here. Hi, everybody.
Dr. Bogan, good morning. Frank Fernandez.
I'm here. Happy New Year.
Frank. Antoinette Krause.
I'm here.
Amy Lowenstein.
Yes, I'm here.
Alexis Miller.
I'm here.
Dr. Conti.
Good morning. I'm here.
Morning. Secretary Arkush is not able to make it, but had already provided a written vote of support ahead of this meeting. So Colleen Kavanaugh.
Good morning.
I think I saw you. Yep, there you are. And Tia.
Good morning. I'm here.
There's Tia. Very good. So now we'll pause for an opportunity for public comment, which is required by the Sunshine Act. And in the absence of an official policy related to public comment, and to ensure the orderly progress of the meeting, all comments should be directed to the chair and should be limited to no more than 3 minutes in duration. Questions asked of the chair or the board may or may not be addressed. With that, I will open it up in case there is any public comment. Hearing none, we will move right along. And Devin, the agenda is it's that time of year again when the federal government issues the notice of benefit and payment parameters. I think historically Pennie has submitted a letter. The timing has been different in prior years as we've had a board meeting that we could conceptually approve. So Devin and I had talked about whether we would need a quick special meeting and ultimately landed on that because I don't think the reg was out yet at our last meeting. Maybe it was, but it would have been just at the early stages. But I will turn it over to you, Devin, to kind of introduce the proposed response to this CMS proposed reg.
Great, thank you. And thanks everyone for joining us today for this meeting on our proposed policy responses to the CMS Notice of Benefit and Payment Parameters. For those of you who are unfamiliar with it, it's an annual regulation, and this one would apply policies for the plan year of 2025. And it's the proposed regulation where CMS issues different policies around exchange policies and general insurance ones. So we focus really here on the exchange specific policies that they've proposed and have, as in past years, we have a summary here of what the relevant policies were and our proposed response to them. And then based on the conversation today, we would finalize a comment letter and submit that for the deadline, which is on Monday. And it was a pretty short turnaround this year. I think the rule was issued in mid to late November with the comment deadline being on Monday. So appreciate the the ad hoc meeting today and the discussion. So to walk through the different policies and our proposed responses to them, I'm going to turn it over to David Thompson, our Director of Policy.
Thanks, Devin. All right, so I'll try to keep my remarks brief. Hopefully you've had a chance to look at these slides in advance. So this year, there's really, and for this slide, we're not going to comment on all of this here, but wanted to provide a summary of what the NBPP looks like this year. One of the main things was CMS is proposing new federal standards for marketplace operational procedures and would require state-based marketplaces to implement new network adequacy requirements. The new federal standards are things that Pennie already does. We already have an open enrollment period that goes to January 15th. We already have a contact center that that has live people present to answer customer questions and phone calls, things like that. But some of those standards were federalized here in this proposed rule. It provides additional flexibilities for state implementation of essential health benefit standards. We'll get more into that on the next slide. It would remove certain administrative barriers, such as burdensome DMI procedures that ultimately we don't believe are very necessary, and neither does CMS. And then it spends a bulk of time providing additional guidance for states on the FFM and those on the federal platform regarding the implementation of standardized and non-standardized plans. What's relevant for us is that it asks whether CMS should require state-based marketplaces that do not have standard plans to do so. And then something that it also pertains to us is that it would require state agencies for the first time to pay to use an optional federal income verification check. We refer to it as the Equifax check that Pennie currently uses to try and resolve income data matching issues from the IRS. So that's kind of a brief summary of the proposed rule. In past years with this administration, there have been proposed rules that kind of would make somewhat dramatic changes to policy. This is not one of those, in my opinion, but there are several provisions here that that would impact Pennie that we wanted to comment on. Next slide, please. So what we are proposing to submit comments on are on this slide, starting with in the proposed rule, CMS is proposing to give states the option to include adult dental and vision benefits as part of its EHB standards. We support having the option to do that. Currently, only pediatric dental benefits can be included as EHB and therefore applicable for APTC purposes. In a similar vein, it would no longer consider additional benefits covered in a state's EHB benchmark plan to be subject to cost defrayal. So currently, if PID were to add benefits to our essential health benefits plan, those would be considered additional, and therefore a customer we could not apply advanced premium tax credits to cover those benefits. So that cost would be borne by the consumer. We think that this is a very reasonable proposal and would allow states to have additional flexibility on their EHB standards. We also support allowing exchanges to accept self-attestations of incarceration status. The FFM currently does this, but they're finally kind of making this option available for all marketplaces. The data source that we use to rely on incarceration status can be outdated, and it's just another barrier for people to access coverage. And it also clarifies that insurers have the flexibility to extend monthly premium payment deadlines when there are technical issues or they're directed to by state or federal authority. Currently, it's explicit that they can do this as it relates to binder payments. This clarifies that they can extend for monthly premium payment deadlines during the year as well. We have a special enrollment period currently for those with income under 150% of the federal poverty level. Currently, that's tied to the enhanced subsidies being in place. This would remove that requirement and make that SEP permanent. We think that is a good thing for our market and helps some of our most vulnerable in our communities get enrolled through Pennie throughout the year. A couple of things that we oppose. One is the proposed rule would require state exchanges to establish their own network adequacy standards. We don't oppose having strong standards. What we oppose is requiring state-based exchanges to implement something that would supersede in Pennsylvania is covered by the insurance department. We're asking CMS to allow states, continue to give states the flexibility to decide which entity is responsible for establishing network adequacy standards. So again, our opposition is not to having strong standards. It is the requirement that an exchange would have to have their own. PID does that, and we want the flexibility for that to remain the case. Also, it would require exchanges and other state agencies to pay for the use of the verification of current income or Equifax check. This is a secondary income check that Pennie uses if the IRS returns data that indicates that there is a data mismatch between the customer's attested income and what the IRS has in their system. The IRS data can be up to 2 years old. Equifax can be much more recent. And so we use that as a secondary check in an attempt to verify a customer's income without generating a data matching inconsistency. Charging for this service could, CMS kind of gave us a rundown of what a typical month of us using this check would cost under the new system. And for September, if this were in place in September 2023, it would have cost Pennie $67,000 just to run this check. We think that this goes against what CMS and we're trying to do, which is remove as many unnecessary administrative barriers to coverage as we can. And by throwing up this additional cost, it would be operationally more difficult for us to continue to use it, which would potentially increase the number of income data matching issues that we generate. And then regarding their question on standardized plans, we are encouraging CMS to provide state flexibility with whatever they decide to do. We think that it should be up to the state-based marketplaces to determine whether whether we have standard plans in our market, and it should be up to the states if they determine that we should be required to have them. We want to have the flexibility to design them in a way that's best for Pennsylvania and not how they're directed to do so, how the FFM is directed to do that. So that is kind of those are the topics that we are proposing to comment on.
Okay, I see a hand from Alexis.
Yeah, on the charges for income verification, is that, I guess, is CMS currently incurring those costs, but the revenue has been given to the state-based exchanges, and so they're trying to align cost and revenue? Or like what's behind that?
So currently, Equifax charges the federal government to make this check available to the states. And because this is an optional check, we're not required to use it. They want to pass off this cost to the states. Now, for Medicaid and CHIP, there is they provide at least a cost sharing type like match to reduce the cost of this check for Medicaid and CHIP agencies. They do not offer that for exchanges.
If they did, I mean, there's a chance that they could take this feedback and modify it to be the same approach as Medicaid and CHIP. Is that true?
They could do that. We're opposing being charged at all.
Yeah, I know.
If they were, it would be more palatable if, they were to kick in for some of it and share the cost with us instead of just transferring all of it to us.
Mhm.
But, for just a random SEP month during the year, September, not a ton of activity, it would still be a significant cost for us. And so, over a course of a year, could be $1 million plus.
Yeah.
So it would definitely cause us to take a look as to whether we could have, afford to do this, or we should try and, some other means of getting this information.
Okay.
Okay, next I had Antoinette.
Thanks. This is Antoinette. David, thanks for your explanation on the buckets. My question is there language that kind of clarifies the network adequacy piece of it? Because when I first read it, I read it and got scared that we were saying we oppose stricter network adequacy standards. So I just want to make sure there's language that makes it clear that we support the network adequacy standards. It's really how we operationalize that in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, so in our comment letter, we state that we don't oppose the fact that they want states to have standards that are at least as stringent as the federal government. We already do. PID standards are already much more stringent than FFM standards, and we support maintaining that. We don't, at this point, because we already have standards that go farther than the federal government, we don't think that we don't want to then have to come up with our own standards that would basically write the standards that PID already enforces and is required to enforce. It's superfluous, and we don't really want to be in that business. But we make it clear that we don't oppose having strong standards. We just already have stronger standards, and there's no need for us as an exchange to implement our own.
Does that answer your question, Antoinette?
Yep.
Yeah. And just to be clear, I mean, PID, I think, anticipates providing a similar comment that the reg, I mean, it doesn't clear, it should be more clear on deferring to the state and how the state approaches it versus just putting it on the exchange versus the department, because we do currently use the more stringent standard of Act 68 or the federal government standard, depending on which speaks to a certain line of profession and what network standards would apply in that case. So, I mean, we're already at least as stringent as the federal government, and certainly more stringent in how PID looks at it. So we'll suggest that it shouldn't necessarily preclude a department from continuing to regulate network adequacy, while recognizing that not all insurance departments do. We didn't in Tennessee. Now that was an FFM, but when I was at the department there, it wasn't an authority that the insurance department had. So, I mean, when you look at it differently, each state is going to look at it different. So I think it's important that they defer to the states on how we're going to do it. Tia, you were next.
Hi, just a clarifying question. When it comes to the verification for the income, did you say we're currently using this system?
Yes.
Or we are not? We are currently using the system. So
yes.
The example you gave about September, let's say $68,000 for that verification. Are we already paying that? Or
no? So yeah. So our state officer, our CMS state officer, sent us our current utilization by month of the verification of current income check, and so based on their formula for how they would charge states to use it. They're proposing to charge states based on the responses that come back. So about 25% of those who go through this check actually get a response, or get a response that verifies their income. So we would get charged based on that. And I think for September, we got something like 15,000 responses, and it's about $3.50 to $4 per response. And so so when they, based on the figures that they gave us, based on our usage, our current utilization, and their tier 1 and tier 2 pricing proposals, we did the calculations, and September, I just picked a random month, it would have cost us $67,000. If our December 2022 utilization, right in the middle of open enrollment, for example, that would have been over $100,000. So I just picked a month that was during the year, nothing significant going on. It's kind of an example of, even in a low volume month, it's still a big cost for us to incur.
Yeah, just for some quick additional context, so the marketplace uses a range of data sources to validate consumer information through the Data Services Hub. This is one of many, so we check Homeland Security, IRS, and IRS is the primary one. So really anyone who doesn't have their income data validated by IRS, it's only that subset that would then go to Equifax. And then of that, as David mentioned, about 25% are able to verify income. So it is a helpful check to consumers, but also wanted to clarify that it isn't the primary, and it only is for those people who aren't able to validate their income with IRS data.
Okay, and then the other comment is, can we get a copy of the submission that we'll be sending in? Once it's finalized.
Yeah, I assume David or Devin, it's due what, Monday, I think, Monday or Tuesday. I assume you'll share with the board a copy of what goes.
Yep, so we have it drafted, tentative, based on this discussion, have it ready to make any, updates or tweaks, and then we'll certainly share that around.
Great, thank you.
Amy.
Hey, thanks. I want to just follow up on what Antoinette had asked and just get a little more clarification. So regarding the network adequacy standards. So I understand, the desire not to have the requirements imposed on the marketplace. I think other states are in the same position. New York also doesn't use the marketplace to set network adequacy. But what I wasn't hearing is that we are supporting the requirement to have the states in whatever manner comply with the federal standards minimally. I was hearing we don't oppose having strong standards generally. So it seems to me that if that's what we're going to do, is we're going to support the requirement that states comply with federal minimum standards for time and distance, and oppose it to the extent it puts the requirement on the exchange rather than some other entity that's already set up. So I would prefer we have it modified in that way, to
Yeah,
make that
sorry.
clear.
I apologize. I wasn't clear on. So we're specifically asking the federal government to remain agnostic as to which state entity establishes and enforces network adequacy standards, provided that the standards are enforced at least as stringent as the federal standards. So we're saying as long as states are meeting the federal standards, as long as we are enforcing network adequacy standards the way that they want us to, we should be able, each state should be able to decide which department has jurisdiction over that. Hopefully
Okay,
that.
yeah, and I think
clarifies.
I think the word opposition is a little strong here for the letter, so I would encourage it to, I would hope it would say, support in part and oppose in part, because we want you to remain agnostic on this point.
yeah, the emphasis is definitely to remain agnostic and, don't want to do duplicate or confusing work or create, more work for carriers or anything like that for standards that are already enforced at a higher level. So it's really focused on, as currently drafted, focused on who is doing it and remaining agnostic to that. And as David said, so as long as the federal minimum, I understand their posture of wanting to have a federal minimum. This is a structure they have in place for a lot of policies, but I think really emphasizing it on who's actually operationalizing it is what the comments are.
Okay, thank you.
Colleen.
Could you go into a little bit more detail on how the costs are going to be defrayed for any additional EHB required benefits?
Yeah, so right now, I mean, so now if PID were to add a benefit to our essential health benefits package, that would be considered additional to federal EHB standards. So that cost would go directly to the consumer. They would pay for whatever the cost of that benefit is out of pocket. This would allow APTC, because this would be included under the umbrella of essential health benefits and not considered an addition, APTC could then be used to pay for this benefit in a world where we had that structure.
Okay. I guess because looking at some of the comments from the trades regarding, that they are submitting to CMS regarding these different initiative, different opportunities, I guess, to enhance things going forward. They're looking at those additional costs being borne by the states or the insurance carriers. So those are some of the comments that I'm seeing from the trades. So I just wanted to make sure we were clear on where those costs would be borne if we were to implement
Yeah, I think
something new.
So I think that the statute does refer to as state cost deferral of additional benefits. So like if a state requires an additional benefit, either the state would have to defray that or the consumer would, if, for example, the state didn't have money, or I guess the insurer would. I mean, I think it's a little unclear. It just is very clear that APTC would not cover that. And so this would change that to say that if a state did add an additional benefit, that amount would be eligible for APTC dollars. So there would not need to be any discussion around defrayal in the future if there are updates and additions to the EHB package. And, Commissioner, I don't know if you wanted to add anything from the PID perspective on this as well.
No, I think you covered it. I think I don't know of many states that have paid. I mean, theoretically, it locked in what the standard benefit was going to be in 2012, and any new benefit mandate was one that the state had to pay for. You'd pay for it by either a PM increase on the premium, or you could have to pay on the back end for the claims as a result of the new benefit mandate. That said, the administrations since that time have gone back and forth on how far to push that. I think in the Trump administration was going to have states issue reports on what mandates they think are new. That got shot down in a previous version of an NBPP. So now the lack of clarity, I think, continues. And I think this is them suggesting that a state could go incrementally further on just the dental and vision part, and won't potentially trigger this issue that I'm not sure anyone actually thinks would be triggered in the first place. But it's an issue that every health insurance company that I've seen in any state that I've been in argues when the legislature introduces a new health benefit mandate. Oh, how are you going to pay for that, et cetera, et cetera. State departments of insurance flag that for legislatures, because theoretically the statute says that a state has to defray the cost.
Thank you.
Tia, did you have a question still?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I lower my hand.
Just wanted to make sure.
Commissioner, this
any-
is Cheryl. Could I just follow up on
Yeah, go
something you
ahead.
said? Are you saying that the defrayal only in the NBPP only relates to the dental and vision, or we're eliminating the deferral for any potential added benefits going forward, mandates going forward?
The latter, any potential additional benefits. There's kind of, we wrapped it up into one kind of section on EHB changes, but there's two distinct ones. One, it would allow states to include adult dental and vision benefits as part of its EHB standards. And then it also says that if a state adds adds benefits to their EHB, whether it's dental, vision, or something else, that would no longer be subject to defray.
Okay, that's what I thought.
And I think, from Penny's position, we see consumers who find these benefits helpful, especially dental and vision. We get asked about that, but also other ones. So from the marketplace position, saying, supporting policies that would allow benefits that are tailored to a given state to be covered.
Any other questions? I'm not seeing any. I know Dr. Bogan had to jump, Dr. Arkush, and suggested that she'd be supportive of a motion. Dr. Arkush said something similar in writing coming into this meeting. So if there are no more questions, I think we'd be looking for a motion to, what is that? I'm sorry. A motion to approve Pennie to submit a comment letter consistent with the responses that we've discussed today. So do we have someone that will make that motion?
I'll make it. It's Alexis from Highmark.
Alexis moves. Do we have a second?
I'll second. Colleen Kavanaugh.
Colleen seconds. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Same sign. Hearing none, the motion carries unanimously. So we'll reflect that in any minutes that we have. Devin and David will share the letter once we're in final form. And then I think we will look forward to seeing everybody in next month, I think, right? We're in person next month, Devin?
Yep, that's right. February 22nd.
Very good. Okay. Well, thank you all, and hope you enjoy the winter weather that's supposedly coming. So we will see, and
Thanks.
enjoy.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.